What's up, all you R-Space fans? Today, we've got another episode of Relationship Advice. The topic today? I think my sister's friend is trying to steal my husband from me. Let's see how it goes. My sister-in-law, who is 23, is my 28-year-old husband's half-sister. She was the product of their mother's infidelity. His father divorced their mother when he was 12 after he found out through a paternity test she wasn't his. My father-in-law refused to have anything to do with my sister-in-law, but continued to have a relationship with my husband. Because of this, my sister-in-law is very clingy to my husband. My husband is also very protective of his sister and generally doesn't tolerate anything negative being said about her, which is why I'm posting this here before mentioning anything to him. My husband and I bought a house last year, which has its own indoor swimming pool. My sister-in-law was super excited when she saw it and asked if she could use it sometimes with her friend. We said it was fine, as long as she gave us a notice before she turned up. Her and her friend, Chloe, have used it many times before, but almost never when my husband is home. He's a lawyer and works long hours. With lockdown, my husband has started to work from home. My sister-in-law asked me if she and Chloe could come over and use the pool. I told her I was uncomfortable with them coming over as I'm pregnant and don't want to accidentally expose the baby to anything risky. My sister-in-law then asked if she and Chloe quarantined for 2 weeks would then be able to come over. My husband said it was fine. 2 weeks later, they turn up to my house. My husband was in his office, so they go straight to the pool after making small talk. My husband ends up coming out after an hour, and we're hanging out in the kitchen. My sister-in-law walks in to get a drink, and she starts talking to my husband. Before she goes back to the pool, she says, "Chloe's going to be so happy to see you." It was weird because my husband and Chloe aren't close. Chloe comes into the kitchen 2 minutes later and spends the rest of her time talking to my husband until he excuses himself to get back to work. She's super giggly and smiley when she talks to him. He would say something sarcastic, and she would laugh like it was the funniest joke she had ever heard. It honestly felt like she was flirting with him. Before she went back to the pool, she gave me this weird smirky look. Before they leave, they ask my husband if he's working from home every day of the week. He confirms he is. The next 2 weeks, they come over to the house to swim every single day, except Chloe never gets in the water. Instead, she hangs around the house in her bikini. She was previously wearing a one-piece if it makes a difference. Every single day. Whenever my husband comes out to hang around me, she quickly interrupts him and keeps him talking until he has to go back to work. I made lunch for all of us, and when I excused myself to call my husband down, my sister-in-law quickly stopped me and said Chloe could call him for me. They shared a look, and Chloe looked really happy when she went to get him. Chloe has also started to get touchier with my husband. She's put her hands on his chest and arms, stands or sits really close to him. To my husband's credit, he does usually create space between them whenever she does something like this. The reason I believe my sister-in-law is in on this is because she's made a few pregnancy-related jabs at me recently. She told me a story about how one of her friend's boyfriends was cheating on her, and then said something along the lines of, "Did you know a lot of men start cheating when their wives are pregnant?" She's also made comments about how I look chubby now, and it looks weird next to my husband because he's well built. If she spots my husband out of the office, she quickly goes to inform Chloe. I know my pregnancy hormones can mess with a person's brain, so I'm wondering if I'm just looking for something that isn't there. My sister-in-law sent me a text yesterday asking if they could come over to swim next week, and I really want to say no, but I know she'll whine to my husband if I do. I ideally want to have a conversation with him before then, but I'm not sure if I should mention the flirting. Am I being delusional? Too long didn't read. Sister-in-law and her friend are constantly asking to come over to use our pool, but her friend never swims. Instead, she waits around to start talking with my husband. She seems very flirtatious whenever she talks to him, but I'm not sure if it's just pregnancy hormones getting to me. Update. Well, I read and reread all the comments of the original post to try and figure out how I was going to bring up the issue. Turns out, I didn't have to. We were watching a movie, and my phone lit up with another text from my sister-in-law, telling me she was now going to be here at 1 p.m. the next day to swim with Chloe. My husband saw it and told me to tell her not to come. This is really weird behavior for my husband because he tends to do anything to accommodate my sister-in-law and very rarely refuses her anything. I asked him if something had happened and he shrugged it off, and we kept watching the movie. A few minutes later, he paused the movie and said he wanted to ask me a question. He asked if I'd noticed Chloe never swam when she came to our house. I wish I could say I was calm and collected like the comments were advising, but I ended up laughing hysterically. I was honestly just so relieved he'd brought it up instead of me having to be the one to do it. I think my husband thought I was losing my mind. When I finally stopped laughing, he repeated the question and said he wanted a serious answer. I said, "Of course I've noticed. and he awkwardly replied, "So you must have noticed the other thing too." To summarize the conversation that followed, my husband hadn't noticed Chloe was flirting with him the first few days because he was so busy with work, he wasn't really paying attention to anything else. He said when she started getting handsy is when he suddenly had the light bulb moment that she was into him. He says he didn't want to unnecessarily stress me out, so he never mentioned anything, but he was worried I'd noticed too and thought he was interested because he hadn't immediately shut it down. He realized we would eventually have to have this talk, but he wasn't sure how to bring it up. Oh, the irony. He did privately speak to Chloe and told her he was happily married and wasn't interested in starting anything with anyone else. Apparently, she never took him seriously because she kept doing it. In the end, he called his sister on Sunday to tell her either she got her to stop or Chloe couldn't come over anymore. His sister ended up having a tantrum and said a few nasty things about me, the baby, our relationship. She insisted I was somehow behind his request and made some comments about how I was controlling and insecure because I looked like a beach whale and Chloe was younger and hotter. He was pretty pissed at this and said if she said something like that about me again, he would stop speaking to her. She claimed I had baby trapped him, and when my husband pointed out we were already married so I didn't need to trap him and that he was the one who wanted to start a family, she kept insisting I had manipulated him into feeling that way. She claimed I was unhappy in our relationship and he always looked tired because I was forcing him to slave away to fund my fancy lifestyle whilst I sat on my ass all day. He pointed out he chose to be a lawyer knowing he would have to work long hours, and I had only recently left my job, so her accusations were baseless. She said some other stuff along the same lines, but the thing that made my husband finally snap was when she said it, the baby, was already ruining everything and it was just going to get worse when it was born and he should have dragged me to the abortion clinic whilst he had the chance. He told her neither her nor Chloe were welcome in our home anymore until they apologized for how they'd been behaving and for the things my sister-in-law said. He said he wasn't sure he could ever forgive or forget what she said about our child, even if she did apologize, and he couldn't believe she would even think something like that, let alone say it. Apparently, she started crying and said she was sorry, that she didn't mean it, and she was just scared to lose him, and that she wasn't thinking clearly. He hung up on her. He showed me his phone, and she's been calling him and texting him since, begging him to reply. He asked if she'd said anything to me. I was debating whether to say anything or not, but he kept insisting he knew she had said something, and he wanted to know what it was. I told him the things I mentioned in the original post, and a few other things she had said. He asked me why I never mentioned anything when she first said it, and I mentioned how he got really defensive whenever I said anything even slightly negative about his sister, and he got defensive. I pointed out he was doing it again, and after some back and forth, he admitted that maybe he was a little bit defensive when it came to her. But he promised to stop, and he wanted to make sure we could talk about anything, including his sister. He ended up mentioning wanting to try couples counseling. He said it wasn't because he thought there was something wrong with our relationship, but apparently he's been speaking to his dad a lot recently, and he mentioned one thing he regretted about his marriage with mother-in-law is that they never went to therapy until the cracks in the relationship were too big. In his current marriage they go, and it's helped him avoid the mistakes of his first marriage. I agreed, so we're probably going to try that soon. My husband thinks my sister-in-law will eventually turn up, even if we tell her not to, but he promised he'd deal with her if she does. So, Reddit, I guess you were right. I really did just need to speak to him. Thanks for the advice and comments. I enjoyed reading them all. Too long didn't read. We talked. Husband already confronted both the friend and sister-in-law. Sister-in-law said some really things, so we won't be contacting her for a while. Communication is key, folks. Amen. What's up, everybody? Welcome to r/ProRevenge, where a short-term loan company manipulating hundreds of thousands of desperate people gets the hammer of federal justice. This was back in 2015. I had recently been let go from my previous gig. My dad had just been diagnosed with cancer, and due to my less than killer performance in channel partner sales, they needed me to start working weekends. Of course, this was a non-starter with my dad being sick, so we shook hands and went our separate ways. No hard feelings. But now, I'm out of work. A month or two later, I was offered a great job with a large company that was a sizable bump in pay and a much better title, so of course I accepted. But I had to move across the country to take this job. But it was worth it. And my dad seemed to be on the mend, and the cancer seemed to be in remission, so I felt okay with moving away. At the time, I lived about 30 minutes away from my parents. The new company was a massive short-term lending company with over 1,000 locations across the US, and was the leader in payday loans, title loans, etc. I didn't love the idea of working for one of these type companies, but I figured people make poor financial decisions all the time, and no one is forcing them to take the loan, and they likely understand what they are getting into. Important note. My job at Company A was basically to line up partnerships to help drive referrals to us from people looking for loans, but didn't qualify for a real bank loan, etc. I quickly ramped up monthly revenue to $1 million plus per month in just a few months being there. Everyone was nice, seemed like a good gig, except for one ex-Army a-hole, who I'll call Sergeant A-hole, who would make snarky comments about everyone, watch the clock, and report you to HR if you came in at 9:05 a.m. instead of 9 a.m., leaving at 5:45 p.m., not 5 p.m., etc. You get the picture. Part of my job was to audit the third-party applications to verify the loans that occurred, and the loan balance or amount to calculate the referral commission for the affiliates. Basic due diligence. But I had to look at the contract for the loan they signed and the accompanying terms and conditions, and that's when I started seeing red flags left and right. People were on welfare or Social Security taking loans against their car title with payment terms they would never be able to pay back. Old ladies taking out a personal loan against her Social Security payments to help pay for their grandkids' school books, etc. Just heartbreaking scenarios. Having a background in business finance and business law from college, I knew they were royally screwed the moment they signed that contract and would eventually lose their only car through repossession, be forced to sign over Social Security checks to make due on the loan, as they unfortunately agreed to that in the contract. Just awful things. I started bringing this up to any exec or leader that would listen. They all said, okay, but no change happened. I think we all felt super shitty as a group about this company deep down, but it's our livelihood. Around this point, my gut kept telling me to document this and keep it for some reason. I didn't know what I would do with it at the time. I just felt this urge to do so. So I did. I stayed and started collecting every bit of info I could find on them, coercing people, even illiterate people, into signing the loan. I saw this in person multiple times, doing store audits, basically using sleazy used car salesman tactics to close the loan. Company A intentionally not explaining that the 28% interest is monthly, not annual, and you have to basically close the loan every month that's not paid in full and sign a new one every month with new interest, carry over from the previous balance, plus new fees, several hundred per new loan, basically every month. And overall, just taking full advantage of desperate, financially illiterate people, fully knowing they couldn't ever pay off the loan, and they would milk them for every dollar, then repo their car and sell it at auction, or threaten to make the past loan payments known to their employer and threaten to garnish wages. Just horribly mean-spirited business practices. I hated it and hated Company A, and everyone in leadership that knew this was happening and basically said, "This is our business practices, it's legal." I knew full well it was not legal or ethical. I followed my gut instinct and had one of those mini handheld scanners and would print off every CFPB federal violation I came across. I'd scan it and save it, compile it at home on an SD card. Fast forward a few months, my birthday's coming up, and I had planned to take a week off to celebrate with my family back home. With my dad very sick at this point, I knew this was likely my last birthday with him. We had a blast. Definitely top 5 family memories of all time. We lived it up and did everything we could think of together. The time comes to go back to work in the other state, and I didn't want to leave, but told my mom, I will come back home in a heartbeat when you need me to. I get back from PTO. The next day, Monday, Mom calls. Dad is in very bad shape. I run it by Awesome Boss. He says, don't talk, go home, come back when you're ready. Awesome, amazing guy with a huge heart. He will always have a special place in my heart for that response. He understood work was not important right now. For context, Sergeant A-hole was passed over for Awesome Boss job, and it was given to Awesome Boss instead. So from day one, Sergeant A-hole had it out for all of us, and he wanted that gig, and was determined to get it by any means necessary. Day 2, Tuesday, back home, Awesome Boss calls me, tells me he's been fired. Apparently, Sergeant A-hole complained to the CEO and COO about his lax approach to his team, letting me just leave without approval, etc. And now, Sergeant A-hole is my boss, and Awesome Boss lets me know that Sergeant A-hole will probably fire me too once I get back, so wanted to give me a heads up with everything else I was dealing with. He just didn't want me to be blindsided. A number 1 guy. I stay through the funeral, then fly back to face the music. 10 minutes in, Sergeant A-hole calls me into his office, tells me I violated company policy by taking unapproved time off, and that we needed to talk to HR. I explained what happened. Dad passed, funeral, mom is distraught, etc. He says, "I'm sorry that happened, but company policy doesn't excuse that." The lady in HR felt so bad I had to be fired, by the COO nonetheless. I tell her I've only been here 4 months, and I've spent all my savings relocating down here for the job. This really puts me in a difficult financial situation. She says she'll work hard to get me some severance, as I don't qualify for unemployment yet, being there for just a few months. Sergeant A-hole chimes in, "Well, you wouldn't qualify anyways. You're being fired for non-compliance and excessive absences." Okay, what the f ever, dude. HR calls me on the phone the next day saying Sergeant A-hole contacted the COO to make sure I didn't get any severance. So now I'm broke, 5 months into a 12-month lease, with no money and no job. I'm up creek without a paddle, and without my go-to guy, my dad, in this situation. I had to sell most of my stuff, pack up and move home to live with my mom. Now comes the righteous revenge. I tried to be civil, but the new boss and the exec team played dirty. The time of reckoning is now. I remembered my database of incriminating practices that violated CFPB guidelines, called up Awesome Boss to get his feedback and advice, and he wanted to help. Now we have a team. He spent the next several weeks building a massive file to submit to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau for unfair and predatory lending practices by Company A, which we were somehow complicit in, but both voiced our concerns. But we needed to make this right. We knew we had been a part of this monster, and it's the least we should do to correct it. I gave everything I had to my awesome boss, now teammate, and we provided the CFPB everything I had seen in the brick and mortar locations, all the incriminating docs I had, and gave 2 detailed written statements of our concerns about Company A to the CFPB for their investigation under the condition of anonymity. We never heard back and assumed nothing would come of it, but we did our best to right this wrong we had participated in. Unknown to us, there were thousands of complaints against Company A by consumers, and Awesome Boss let me know he heard from them, and what we provided helped them build their cases against Company A. Awesome Boss calls me about 5 months later, now early 2016, to let me know the CFPB called him and something is about to happen. This led to a fairly large consumer protection investigation into Company A, unknown to me and Awesome Boss at the time. But another several months passed, didn't hear or see anything, so I figured that they hired some top shelf lawyers and made it go away. That is, until June of 2016. While drinking coffee and applying for new jobs at my mom's house in the morning, I was watching CNBC, and hear Company A's name come up. I turned to watch and see that they are getting hit with huge fines, legal fees, and their business has to basically stop all business until the case is resolved. They ended up being levied almost $10 million in fines, over $20 million in legal fees, and lost out about $50 million in revenue while the government pressed pause on their operation. All thanks to Sergeant A-hole, which I later found out from a previous coworker that Sergeant A-hole was fired and thrown under the bus for not reporting employee complaints to the executive team, but they knew full well. I told the COO multiple times what we were doing is probably illegal, but they made Sergeant A-hole the sacrificial lamb in this case. To this day, there are still tons of pending class action lawsuits and regional government actions against them. But it worked out well for me personally. Mom was so glad I was back home. She was having such a hard time without Dad around. They were married for 35 years. I took my downtime to learn a new career that pays much better, and I love my new career and post-Company A life. And it felt good to watch that cesspool of a company get their comeuppance on behalf of everyone they had lied to, stole from, and screwed over. As Grandma always said, some turds sink and some float to the top. In the end, they all get flushed. Was very happy to see this floating turd get flushed. Ephesians 5:11, have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather expose them. And expose I did. Wow, original poster, you gave them the payback they deserved. Well played. You should feel proud knowing that you saved possibly millions of people from future financial hardship. It worked out perfectly that your awesome boss was willing to team up with you and take them down. And it feels good to know that Sergeant A-hole is taking the blame for their downfall. This was the perfect ending to a messed up situation. Thank you for sharing your story. Welcome to r/entitled parents, where a racist entitled Karen tries to steal my dog but fails miserably. I'm from India and I moved to America to finish my studies. I'm 20 years old now. I adopted a cute German Shepherd puppy 2 years ago. I named him Negan. I'm a huge Walking Dead fan. And I somehow trained him to growl whenever the classic Negan whistle played. You'll know what I'm talking about If you've seen The Office in the US, Jim does this to Dwight. It took me a really long time to do this, but it finally worked. And it was really helpful. So there I am, just casually walking Negan. And a lady and her son come up to me and ask if she and her son can pet Negan. I shrug and say whatever. They start petting him. Her hand slowly went towards Negan's collar. I didn't care much because I knew Negan would never walk away from me. I noticed that she had removed the leash from the collar, and Negan was just standing there. She started to do the thing you do when you call your cat. Yeah, that one. Negan just stood there. The kid said, "Mom, you said when the dog runs away we should take it." I was dying inside. I suddenly thought this was the right moment to use the new training. By the way the lady was trying to shut her kid up, she looked up at me and smiled. I just looked at her with a pissed face. She tries to call Negan again. He doesn't go. He doesn't like to go near strangers unless they have food. I just made up a complete story. It went something like this. "Lady, you're a trying to steal my dog." "How dare..." "Shut up. Listen, if you wanted, you could have just had the dog." "What?" "Yep, I need to get rid of this dog. He is a killing machine. He will rip anyone or anything apart who he doesn't like. For instance..." I whistled. Negan began to growl. The lady started to freak out. She backed away a little. "I suggest you run. He will mess you up so bad, they won't be able to recognize your body." The kid, oh my God, he was so scared. He said, "Mommy, I don't want this doggy. He bad." I was dying inside. That's when the racist rant began. By now, Negan stopped growling. The lady slowly started to back the up. "You stupid Mexicans don't deserve to have dogs as pets. You guys kill dogs. Fuck off before I let him rip you into shreds. That dog should be put down. He doesn't deserve to live. He's dangerous." I whistle again. She starts hauling her ass out of there. I burst out laughing. She even tripped. And at the end, guess who got extra treats? Also, for those of you who wanted to know how I trained Negan to do that, basically, I showed him something he hates every time I whistled. For instance, pickles. He hates them. And now, every time I whistle, he thinks I'm gonna try to feed him a pickle. Haha, this is priceless. OP really made her trip in fear of a dog who just didn't want to eat some pickles. Haha. A perfect example of when preparation meets opportunity. She deserved it. Way to go. This next story features another crazy Karen who freaked out and keyed this guy's car for being too loud. So for some background. The car wasn't mine. It was my brother-in-law's. He is suing her for about 60 grand for the damages. I don't know the exact car model, but it's a muscle car and it's manual. Characters: me, brother-in-law, sis, Karen, mom, P1, P2. So it all started when I decided I wanted to start learning stick. Since my brother-in-law is the only person I know with a manual car, I had him come over and teach me. When the car starts up, it does make a rather loud rev. We made sure to do it in the afternoon as not to wake people up and try to be considerate. Anyways, it was about the third or fourth day of him teaching me when she first appeared. Karen: "Nice car. Bit too loud for my taste, but still, it's nice." Me: "Oh, thanks. Mind trying time to keep it down a bit? My baby doesn't really seem to like it that much." "Yeah, sure. We've been driving it in the day so it doesn't wake people up. I didn't know anyone around here had a baby, so I'm sorry about that." "It's not a problem. Just be quiet, okay?" With that condescending tone and smile on her face, she walked off, which kind of made me mad because I just thought it was a friendly chat. It wouldn't be the first time people have talked to me about brother-in-law's car thinking it's mine. I have grown to accept that people will think whatever, so I play along and just tell brother-in-law about it later. 2 days go by with no sign of her. I wake up, get ready, and wait for brother-in-law to come over so we can start my lesson. I walk outside, and lo and behold, she was there. "I thought I told you to keep it down." "Sorry, I can't control it. It's just how the car starts, and we're not going to leave it running while we're not in it. That's just a waste of gas." "I don't care. Stop being so loud." With that, she was gone. It always annoys me when people complain about cars being loud. A car is a motor vehicle with a combustion engine in it. Of course it's going to make noise. Brother-in-law got to my place, and off we went. We came back to my house to eat lunch. About 2 or so hours later, my sister and mom come over and tell brother-in-law and I to go look at the car. The entire driver's side was scratched up, and even a tire was popped. Only one person came to mind when I saw it. Karen. We, meaning me and brother-in-law, walked down to her house, which was only a few houses down, and knocked on her door. All we hear coming from the other side is, "I'm not apologizing." So this led brother-in-law to say, "Then you better have a good case in court, you That's more gonna cost a lot to fix, and I'm suing you for every cent."
"Maybe keep it down then, you hick."
"Maybe don't go keying cars and popping tires and you won't get sued, you bimbo." This went on for about 20 minutes. We head back, call the police, and get everything ready for what was about to come. As soon as they got there, we started to explain what happened, how I was learning stick, how the car was, showed them the damages, told them what the Karen said, etc. We were making sure our side was accurate, so we made sure our timeline was correct. After a while, we walked with the police to her house, and it went down about as well as you'd expect. Police officer 1. "Excuse me, ma'am. Can you come out here for a minute? This is the blank PD, wanting to speak to you about a car."
"I'm not apologizing. I told them to keep it down and they didn't. They deserve it."
Police officer 2. "Ma'am, what you did is against the law, and they are pressing charges. You have 5 minutes to get out here, or we will get a warrant for your arrest and come back."
"Nice try, but I'm not stupid. I know my rights, and you're not allowed to enter my home without my consent or a search warrant."
"That's only partially true. We can't search your home without a warrant. However, if we have a warrant for your arrest, we can legally enter your home and place you into custody." She was stubborn. Again, they went back and forth for a bit. After the allotted time set, we went back to my house. The cops left to go get a warrant, and we waited. Currently, the lawsuit is in order, and the trial is in a few days. She is in police custody. I have never found it easier to drive a stick shift knowing I won't have to deal with her condescending ways and tones. While I can understand this Karen's anger, and maybe OP should have been more courteous of a request, her reaction was too extreme considering the baby wasn't in any actual harm. Babies cry at all types of sounds, and it's just what comes with raising a kid. In this final story, a vicious 40-year-old Karen stalked my 11-year-old son for not liking her daughter. Basically, there was a little girl in my son's class, 5th graders, 11 years old, who would say my son was bullying her. At first, we believed the teachers her and would discipline him at home, but his story was always consistent that he wasn't doing it, and then he started gathering witnesses who confirmed that he was not bullying her, and there were never people corroborating her stories. The stories also just frankly didn't sound like him or anything he'd do. Kids also said she was bullying him and other kids by pushing them. We also learned that she had put a love note in his backpack and he didn't notice it and left it crumbled there for months without being addressed. It was right around the time she sent it that the accusations of bullying started. You would think that this story would end with just a few calls to the principal and parents, but it did not. The girl's mom started showing up at school to stalk, stare at my son during breakfast, lunch, and at dismissal. She also tried to get him kicked out of a sport. Coach said he has never seen bullying, and if so, he will deal with it. And the mom sent letters to other kids' parents saying that my kid was a bully and they shouldn't let their kids play with him. And she would spread this same thing by word of mouth. I felt completely overwhelmed because I work and did not have the ability or relationships with other families to correct this craziness. I also tried talking to the Karen mom directly, but she denied that her daughter could possibly make the bullying up, saying, "That is not how I raised her." She also denied stalking my son.
"That would be crazy."
And read the letter that was sent to the other parents to me and acted like it was totally normal for her to do that. Then, one day she brought along her much older son to breakfast who physically attacked my kid. When the principal told her that this situation had gotten out of hand and she couldn't bring her older son to school to intimidate students, she declared that she was going to start homeschooling her child. This was the Friday before school let out for spring break, and by the following week, we were at distance learning. So in a way, that was actually the case for everyone for the rest of the school year. My son is starting a new school tomorrow, middle school, and he keeps asking if any other moms will do that again and if I will ever go to school for lunch to make sure no moms stalk him. I keep thinking about this situation like, what the I am so sorry this situation happened to you and your son, OP. It's crazy when some people think it's acceptable regardless of if the bullying was actually happening. What is that teaching the children? Jeez. What up, R-Space fam? Welcome to another episode of r/entitled parents, where financial irresponsibility wreaks havoc on family bonds. In this first story, Reddit user DCHolic19 gets told by their entitled parents that We're having a sixth kid we can't afford, so we expect you to give us your college fund. I, female 19, am my parents' second child. I have 3 brothers, 21, 13, and 7, and a sister, 16. We grew up poor, and our parents were often dependent on financial help from relatives, friends, etc. for raising us. This is because even though my dad has a mediocre job and my mom doesn't work, they just kept on popping out one kid after another. My parents are very religious and believe that children are a gift from God. Personally, I think that's total BS. My parents' reproductive choices wouldn't bother me if it hadn't caused mine and my siblings' lives to turn to shit. While growing up, we never had new clothes or toys. We had to accept handouts from family members who were better off. We never went out or did anything fun. To top it off, we were all well aware that the rest of the family looked down on us for constantly asking for handouts. Now, my older brother and I have managed to get into good colleges and are looking forward to a future that would be better than our parents' lives. He and I were staying at our parents' place for a while due to the lockdown. One morning, my parents called all 5 of us into the living room. My mom said she had great news. The smile that was forming on my face died a quick death when she said, "We're pregnant." I lost my temper. I asked them how they could be so stupid and irresponsible. Do they not have enough financial troubles already that they have to bring in another mouth to feed? My older brother tried to calm me down, but I was livid. After a lifetime of scarcity because of my parents' stupidity, they still hadn't learned their lesson. I asked them how they planned to provide for the kid. My dad told me I would have to give up the money our great uncle had left me. He had left all 5 of us some money, which only we could access when we turned 18. I said, hell no! That money would help me pay for my college expenses. He called me selfish for not being there for the family. I told them if they couldn't provide for the kid, they should get an abortion. My mom started crying and called me a heartless monster. Dad told me he was disgusted with me. I told him there was no way I was going to pay for their stupidity, and the only thing I would be willing to pay for is a termination. What I was really worried about was my siblings' lives getting even worse. My older brother and I have escaped our parents' clutches, but the others, especially my younger sister, will be expected to help take care of this baby. No teenager deserves to have their adolescence ruined by diapers and a screaming baby. I know what it's like, as I had to go through that. It was expected of me to be an unpaid nanny to my younger brothers and sisters. My older brother could go out with his friends and have fun, but I had to stay home and help give baths and feed toddlers. I decided to get some family members involved so they could talk some sense into my parents. I called my mom's maternal cousin. She's one of my favorite people. When I told her that my mom and dad were having another kid, she reacted with, "What? Again?" I told her everything and how they expected me to hand over my inheritance. She said she was going to speak to my parents and told me not to sign over anything. I promised her I wouldn't. Of course I won't. I also called 2 of my first cousins, one of whom is an accountant, so she could explain to my parents how much of a financial liability this baby is going to be and try to convince them to either abort or give it up for adoption. I moved out of my parents' home a few days ago. I was only going to stay there till the lockdown was relaxed, but I just can't bear to listen to my mom's nagging about how this baby is a blessing and that I want to kill it. I've moved into a friend's basement for a minimal rent. My mom's cousin paid them a visit about a week ago and tried to tell them that they weren't doing this child any favors by bringing it into a life of poverty. My mom was very rude to my aunt and told her that a woman who chose to remain barren will never understand a mother's love. My aunt never wanted kids, nor had any, one of the reasons she's my fave. My dad told her to get out. Aunt told me there was nothing she could do, but she did try. I don't blame her. The cousin tried to explain the economic impact this kid would have, and my mom cried about how everyone was trying to take away her baby. What the f***? The intervention didn't do f***. So now, I've decided to cut contact with my parents. I just can't watch my family slide further and further into a hellhole. I'll be maintaining contact with my sister, 16, just to make sure my parents can't brainwash her. My older brother is going to stay in touch with all of them, which is a good thing, as he can act as a link between me and the other siblings if my parents ever forbid them from talking to me. Otherwise, I'm done with these people. I applaud you, OP. You don't owe them your college fund? They made their bed, they can lay in it. You might want to discuss with your siblings about signing anything over to their parents if the uncle left all you some money. In this next story, an entitled mother demands her daughter pay for her brother's terrible life choices. Background. My husband comes from a poor background, as in he could not attend college because he had to take up a job in our country's defense forces the moment he was 18. I, on the other hand, come from a middle-class family, as in could attend college and even have a master's degree, but nothing super fancy. We were married, arranged marriage, when I was 24 and he was 25. Before our marriage, all my husband's salary went directly to his family. That means 7 years of income, people. A major part of which actually went to his brother-in-law, as he was too special to find a job. Also could not keep one for longer than a year. When I came to my husband's house, my brother-in-law already had 4 children with his wife pregnant with the 5th. My brother-in-law's credit was a mess, as he had taken multiple loans for funding his alcoholic, holier-than-thou lifestyle, and my husband was a complete pushover with no spine of his own to speak up for himself. It took me 2 years and a toddler, blessed with a baby boy, to force him to grow a spine, as he now had a family of his own and he needed to care for it. I had to make him understand that he can no longer send 90% of our income to his brother and force us to brink of bankruptcy, as his brother cannot afford his own lifestyle. Slowly and slowly, my husband stopped sending them any money, and his parents had enough income to maintain themselves, and it was high time for his brother to get off his lazy ass and do some shit. Main story. Now this is the main event that took place about 5 years ago. When my husband was 30, it forced us to go no contact with my in-laws and a major part of my husband's family. My brother-in-law now had 5 children, blessed with all girls, was on the brink of bankruptcy, and had already used a major part of the inheritance that he was going to be passed down from his parents. This interaction took place on my first 2 nieces' wedding. They had a joint wedding and reception, as brother-in-law didn't have the money for 2 separate weddings. Entitled mother to husband.
You should start helping your brother again, as he is having a lot of troubles with funds lately.
Husband. We're in a pretty tight spot ourselves, Mom, especially with Ellen, me, pregnant, with a 2nd child. Entitled sister.
Well, then you should help your brother even more, as you know what it feels like to be with a pregnant woman. After all, we are also expecting.
Me. What? You're pregnant again? My actual words. Entitled mother.
What do you mean, daughter-in-law? Aren't you happy? It can actually be a boy this time. Not everyone is as lucky as you, who gets a boy on the first chance.
Me, flabbergasted. What the fuck are you talking about? I won't treat a daughter any differently than a son. Entitled sister.
Well, you can say that since you already have a son.
Husband. I don't care about my brother's and his sister's lifestyle choices, but I can't share any more money with them, as I have my own family now, and we have to save to buy a house, start a son's college fund, etc. Entitled mother.
You don't have any right to speak about your brother like that. He is trying to improve.
A lie.
He also has responsibilities.
Me, laughing. Yeah, right. As if he knows what responsibilities are. Entitled sister.
You bitch.
Her actual words.
You dare speak about my husband like that?
Everyone was now looking at us. She gets into my face and actually tries to punch a very pregnant me. Husband, stopping her mid-air. You dare? She's pregnant, and even if she wasn't, how could you think that you could punch her? Me, shocked plus angry. We shall leave now. I don't think we are welcome in this wedding anymore. Husband follows me without speaking any other thing. We got many vile and abusive messages and even threats from his side of the family on how we spoiled our niece's marriage and how family always comes first. Fortunately, we had never given my in-laws our address, and even if they could get it somehow, no one would have had the money for the plane ticket, as we lived at the geographically opposite corner of the country at that time. Also, we have shifted twice since then and have blocked out most of his side of the family, leaving out some of his sensible cousins and uncle and aunts, and informed everyone on my side of the family, plus our friends, to maintain absolutely no contact with them. I'm so glad your husband was able to take your side. I can't imagine being expected to pay for my siblings' irresponsibilities. Your husband's family are now missing out on the joy of your children, all by their own doing. I can imagine your life is much happier now. In this last story, an entitled sister wants all of the trust funds to be given to her kids because she is a single mother. My parents died when my siblings and I were very young. Their estate was divided equally into 3 separate trusts for our education. Anything left over after graduating would be paid out when we turned 25. I watched my siblings squander theirs by falling out of college, renting needlessly expensive apartments, and getting pregnant twice. While they're doing all right now, neither had anything left in their trust by their 25th birthdays. I applied for multiple scholarships, lived with roommates, and worked through school. Even with my master's degree, I still have more than half of my trust. I turned 25 recently and have been planning to buy a house. I mentioned this to my brother, who was surprised to learn I had enough money left to do so. My sister was more than surprised. She was furious and called me to rant about the unfairness of it all. She felt cheated that her baby sister might buy a house before she did because she needed it more as a single mom. I guess I threw fuel on the fire by reminding her that we had the same opportunities but made different choices. Somehow, that turned into me looking down on her kids and hating my nephews. Since then, she has roused the rest of the family against me. I owe her and my brother financial help, because apparently that's what our parents would have wanted. I blocked my sister's number after she demanded I give the rest of my trust to her kids.
The grandchildren our parents would have wanted.
I told her it was laughable to consider that our parents would be happy about their daughter getting pregnant at 20 and dropping out of school. She called me a bitch. Everything is falling apart now. I feel hunted. Wow, the entitlement is strong in this chick. Good for you for sticking to your guns on this one. It's not your fault she chose to squander her money and you saved it.